Hey y'all, welcome to my channel Land Before Time with your host Littlefit. If you didn't get that reference, you probably grew up on Dinosaur Train. Either way, welcome aboard. Let's kick things off with a classic Leetcode problem, twosome. Given an array of integers, nums, and an integer target, return indices of two numbers such that they add up to target. You may assume that each input would have exactly one solution, and you may not use the same element twice. You can return the answer in any order. Before we begin, let's talk about having a framework to default to, specifically for these coding interviews. The way I like to template this out is something like a goal. This is going to be, in a sense, a one-sentence summary of what you're trying to accomplish. Next is going to be the clarifying questions. And for the clarifying questions, they basically are the bounds of the problems to ensure that you are actually solving the correct problem. Now, after clarifying questions, we're going to move on to having some examples. You want to be able to come up with 1 to 2 examples, a few edge cases. Next we have is the blueprint, which in a sense is going to be pseudocode or just a list of bullet points to ensure you don't forget anything during the coding process. And lastly, coding, because obviously that's what you're getting tested on. Based on the amount of time you have for an interview, you want to spend a good portion of your time making the blueprint for what you're actually going to code. Ideally, with most problems, you'll eventually get to the point where coding the solution honestly takes 5 to 10 minutes, whereas creating that blueprint will take 15 to 20 minutes. Now you have to pick a language, right? There's so many options that it can be a little bit daunting. The people's choice would say Python because it's the quickest. My choice, in honesty, pick whichever language you know proficiently and just go from there. I passed the Facebook, Salesforce, and Starbucks interview using Java. The fact that I was able to use a verbose language to do 2 questions in the Facebook interview in 40 minutes, you definitely can't do. So let's get started solving twosome using this framework. We know that our goal is going to be returning an array of 2 numbers such that they add up to the target. So now moving on to clarifying questions. And before I continue on with the step, I want to give a little tip here. Leetcode literally gives you all of the answers to the clarifying questions. And if you don't do this step, in a high stress situation, you're most likely going to forget to ask very key pieces of information and you'll probably end up solving the wrong problem. So even if the, in a sense, clarifying question has been given to you, go ahead and write it down because you want to practice what you're going to end up performing. With that said, let's go ahead and continue on. The first question I want to ask is, what are the bounds of this input? So for the bounds, we're just going to go ahead and copy what the constraints are here, everything except for the last one, which I will explain in a bit. So these are the bounds right here. Now, the second question that I want to be able to ask is, will there always exist a valid solution? So I'll just be like valid solution. And the answer for this question is going to be yes in this case. Can we have multiple solutions? The answer for this one is going to be no. And if we scroll up here, if we forget to do this exercise and we don't reinforce that, can we use repeating elements? Sometimes it's really easy to forget. So let's go ahead and add that to our clarifying question list and we'll just call it repeat. The answer for that is going to be no. And last but not least, can the output be in any order or do we have to have it in the exact same order? And in that case, we can just call it out order and no. So now that we have our clarifying questions, let's go ahead and move on to some examples. And let's just go ahead and take the first Leetcode example that we have here. I'm going to use T short for target, out short for output. now that we know what our input and output is going to be, let's go ahead and try to work this problem. Don't think too much about optimization at this point. Honestly, spend 1 to 2 seconds and come up with the dumbest possible solution. The first solution that comes to my mind is going to be something that will allow me to do something like this. 2 plus 7, 2 plus 11, 2 plus 15, 7 plus 11, and then etc. And in this case, we can see here we got pretty lucky. We found the target on the first shot, but if we were to rearrange this, and we would have had an extra element right here, like a 9, and let's go ahead and also update the output as well. So if we had something like this, we would know we would have to do 9 plus 2, 9 plus 7, 9 plus 11, all the way until we hit 2 plus 7. This seems like this is going to result in an O of n squared runtime. So let's go ahead and try to rework the problem a little bit, maybe use some extra space. Remember those good old data structures, such as probably a hash map or maybe a set. Since we know that we need the index in the input, it seems like hash map is going to be our best bet. So now let's go ahead and rework this problem with using a map. If we use the map way, what we can do is we'll go ahead and do 9 minus 9 the first time. And that's going to be 0. So that's not going to be the target. So let's go ahead and add 9 to the map and 0 for the index. Then the second time around, we're going to do 9 minus 2, which is going to be 7. So let's go ahead and add 2 to the map because we know 7 doesn't exist. Now we are going to be at 9 minus 7, which is going to be 2. 2 does exist in the map. Now that we found the key, we found the missing part. Now that we've worked an example replicating very similarly to what our algorithm is supposed to do, don't just go ahead and jump right into coding just because the problem looks deceptively easy. And what I mean by that is in a high stress situation, it's really easy to just sound all over the place. To prevent that, let's go ahead and blueprint out just so that if we forget something, we have something very easily to refer back to rather than just having to be like, wait, how did this example work? And it will save you so much time, so much pain during the interview when you're so stressed out and you're like, oh my God, I know I just did this and I completely forgot. My brain just decided like to stop working. So highly, highly recommend do not skip out on the blueprint part, no matter how easy the problem is. Because remember, you practice what you want to perform. All right, so now that we have our quick little blueprint, these are kind of our little footnotes in case we do forget. Let's move on to the coding part. This is going to be pretty straightforward at this point. We're going to need a result. All right, and there we have it, twosome. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And happy coding!